This session is called AI Post-Deployment, What Happens When the Machine Does What We Want It to Do. And we've got Simon de Timary, Head of Data and AI for BJSS. Please join me in giving him a huge... Are you wanting to signal someone before we start? There are a couple of seats if people still want to come join down the front. Don't be shy. Please join me in giving Simon a huge welcome and a round of applause to the stage.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Simon. I'm the head of data and AI for BJSS, which is a technology consultancy based in the UK. As you can imagine, over the last 18 months, I've been pretty busy. Me and my team have been a bit overwhelmed with the advances in AI and the new releases that we see on a weekly basis or almost daily basis now. And you can probably imagine that we've had to review some of the way we work and have had to keep up with the pace of change as we help our clients roll out data science and AI initiatives, but also as an organization, as we take it onto ourselves to modernize our operations and the way we work. These tools today are really narrowing the frontiers between fiction and reality. We are starting to see ourselves in a bit of an Asimov type movie or novel, really. So the goal of this talk is to start raising awareness and discuss the changes that organizations need to make to be able to successfully uptake AI. This is not going to be a technical talk. We're going to mention technology, but we're not going to go in any shape of the imagination in deep dive for technology. We'll be talking more about how organizations need to transform, what considerations they need to take on to be able to successfully roll out initiatives. So we'll start by aligning on the assumptions that we need to make to actually focus on organizational change and training and things like that. We'll talk about the impact of AI as seen in the real world, best practices and the path forward. And so speaking about AI, let's start from the beginning. So what do we mean by AI? Well, it kind of looks like magic these days, doesn't it? And I see when I talk to clients, a lot of them just, we could interchange AI by magic in most of the sentences that they come up with, which is a problem. But this probably has something to do with the fact that, we've seen loads of works of fiction in the last decades, and today, fiction is turning into reality gradually, and we now take AI for granted in our day-to-day. So on the screen, you'll see a lot of mature applications of AI that we've been using almost daily. So what really is AI? Well, AI is an artificial system that qualified human could deem intelligent. But a better definition, or at least one that my colleague Pedro Varela, who's the head of data science at BJSS, prefers, is that AI is a discipline that helps understand what intelligence actually is and really what makes us human. So we know that machines will assist and be a big part of the decision process going forward. They will give insights, they will help provide knowledge, and they will act as decision makers. And this is a promise that has been pushed almost down our throats for the last decade, really. First with statistics, and then increasing complexity with machine learning, and then deep learning, and now generative AI, leading to a massive increase in popularity and the uptake of generative AI. And all of these solutions really are tools that are generally brought under the umbrella of AI. They're expected to increase not only the efficiency and the productivity of us as organizations and societies, but also foster innovation in the workplace. So for the purpose of this talk, let's make the bold assumption that AI works. The technology is fine. We're seeing that the technology is really good today already, and it's only going to continue to get better. So no matter what use case you're trying to build, you're looking at, let's assume that the tech's fine, that you've been able to build a model, you've been able to test the model, validate it, roll it out in production. Now what? What happens then? Well, probably nothing. You've missed a few steps along the way. This is not a technology problem. This is a human problem. It's a people processes problem. This is about your customers. This is about your employees. This is about the employers around the organization. So now that we've kind of set this basic topic, let's talk about generative AI. Generative AI is not all of AI, is just a sub-part of it, but it's the one that's been really thrusted in focus in the past 18 months. So we really can't escape the fact that it's now being used by millions of people. So in November 2022, just checking, yeah. In November 2022, OpenAI released ChatGPT. in just 2 months, they had over 100 million unique users, which is the fastest uptake for any application ever. And then a couple of months later, Google goes with their own large language model, Bard, and OpenAI releases GPT-4, and there's already been a dozen models that have been released by then, and we continue to see more accelerations, new models. And this slide is already way out of date. We're at least one generation behind, if not two, already with this slide. So ChatGPT was launched, and the AI world's become very, very exciting. I've been busy, and we have something new happening on a weekly basis. We've got startups and research labs that are heavily invested in AI. We're seeing it as search term that's grown, and the promise of augmentation and automation really offers that silver lining when we have a slowing down economy. So this current wave has been described as the fourth industrial revolution, and we see AI will transform businesses and societies in its wake. One of the things we've seen as well is that just 2 years ago, 50% of experts agreed that artificial general intelligence, which is basically AI being able to be as good at human things as humans are for a large amount of things, was 2040 to 2060. That timeline's been pushed forward massively since the release of OpenAI and ChatGPT. So we're seeing now that it's by the end of the decade, there's a decent chance that we'll achieve artificial general intelligence. I don't know whether that's the case, but that's where experts seem to line on. So we've seen that AI has grown as a term that's in quarterly releases. So we're seeing companies talking about doing AI increasing almost linearly over the past few years. So there is a lot of hype. But this is not a phase. This is kind of steady growth over the years. And what we've seen as well is that the adoption, or at least the readiness to adopt Gen AI has shot up quite dramatically. So in 2023, so less than a year after Gen AI became mainstream, we had business leaders already 40% of business leaders thought that they needed to use Gen AI in their organizations. And then when they started to reflect on the future, 100% of them agreed that they needed to use Gen AI as part of their organizations. That is just months after Gen AI was live. So this is way faster than we've seen for machine learning, for instance. And why is that? Well, a lot of it is the hype that surrounds it. We've seen the headlines. We've seen how Gen AI performs at graduate level for a lot of things. It can pass the bar exam. It can get an MBA. It's really performing in exams and things that appear very, very complicated for most people, really. And we've seen again that in very specific discrete tasks, it really is outperforming humans. And the speed at which it's improved recently is also mind-blowing. So if you look on the graph there, the competition level mathematics, a mere 2 years ago, it couldn't do anything about it. In just 2 years, less than 2 years, it's now competing with humans, some of the better humans as well. But what's even more interesting is the bar chart on the left. This is bedside manners. This is actually agents, artificial agents, able to compete in human tasks, empathy, having conversations with people, and they're outperforming humans. The main reason for that is that they don't have feelings. They don't have a bad day. So it's actually fairly easy for them to take on whatever we throw at them and deal with it in a positive manner if it's been trained properly. But on the other hand, this is all very impressive. But let's talk very briefly about a study that's been performed by a lady called Melanie Mitchell, which is a neuroscientist from the Santa Fe Institute. And she's developed several studies over the years on the cognitive performance of AI. And one of them actually compared humans and machines in solving these reasoning puzzles. So these typical games, you're given a sequence and you have to guess what the next step of that sequence is. And this is where tools like GPT-4, which is until very recently was one of the better performing model on the market, just fails. Like, these are reasonably simple for humans to solve. And this is where, we shouldn't be surprised actually, because knowledge and reasoning are not the same thing. So they have a lot of knowledge. They don't have reasoning, these agents. So we take the ability of these models as granted, but we shouldn't. And really, the reason behind it is this kind of this Moravec paradox. So this is where we tend to get AI wrong. So because we're mind blown with all the amazing things it can do, when it gets stripped on the very simple thing, we get really surprised and frustrated. So, we assume that because they can do things we can't do, they can do everything that we can, and they can't. So a hard human task is easy for the machine, and an easy human task might be very, very hard. So I had a colleague of mine came up to me at an event we organized a couple of weeks ago, and he was basically testing a metaphor with me, saying, can we, could we compare AI to a child, or AI is in its infancy that still has to learn to be a grown-up? And I was like, well, that's the exact opposite of what it is, actually. We've got AI that can perform at graduate or postgraduate level, but it still has to learn how to be a child. It hasn't done that part of it. So when we see something like ChatGPT, we can get disappointed that it does everything top level, but doesn't really do the basic stuff that we need it to. And really, that's a mindset shift that we need to take. We need to realize its limitations so that we can select the right uses, the right approaches when we actually start rolling it out in the enterprise. So the one thing that's certain is that nothing is certain about what's going to happen now. We don't know which model is going to come next. I mean, we've got some guesses, obviously, but we don't know when if artificial general intelligence is going to come about. And we don't know how regulation is going to affect new and existing models, and whether it will put a hamper in the works or not. And all of this creates uncertainty, creates risk, and that needs to be managed properly. So again, we've seen the headlines. As a brand, you want to protect yourself against those types of headlines. So these are edge cases in a way. This is when humans actually start stressing these systems and pushing them beyond the boundaries. So this is where we see, things like hallucination. We're seeing chatbots being very confidently wrong about everything they answer. And this is where, you've got reputational damage that comes about. So the risks are really multiplying, and to manage those risks, organizations are starting to create new roles within the organizations. They're popping up, AI committees are popping up across organizations to start handling those risks with people from different backgrounds and expertise. So within BJSS, I've appointed our responsible AI lead is actually an anthropologist, because we need to have people from other backgrounds. We don't just need data scientists and AI specialists to come in and dissect these problems. So it's very important to start building those safeguards into how we do product management and how we start thinking of these use cases. And one of the better ways to start with this is to select the right users for AI. I spend a lot of my time discouraging our clients to use AI for the thing they came to use AI for. Not because AI can't do it, but because it isn't the right use case for many, many reasons. And we'll talk about some of the dimensions of what makes a good use case now. So first of all, and probably the most important dimension of selecting a right use case is the value that it will bring to you. And value means very different things to different people. So each organization needs to define what value means to them in the case of AI. But it usually comes down to a very simple thing: money. So, can you get cost efficiency? Can you get time efficiencies, cost savings, new revenue streams, anything that can be tangible and can be reported back to the board or for your quarterly earnings? But it can also be about impact. Can you get a killer press release for your use case? Great marketing, positive marketing. Will you make your employees happier? Will you have a positive impact on society as a whole or on the world? Will you help reduce carbon emissions? There are many ways, again, that impact can be quantified and defined. And finally, and that's something that's probably more interesting for an organization like mine, where having diverse use cases, building new capabilities that complement each other is also one way of defining a valuable use case. Second dimension is feasibility. So we've assumed that the technology works. So what can get in the way of feasibility? Well, data is obviously, talked about a lot. Do you have the right data? Can you access it? Do you have the right to use it? Is it unbiased? Are you confident with that data? And then it's about processes. How do your solutions are only going to bring value if they're actually used by the people that they've been designed to use for, whether it's your customers or your staff. So can you weave in this new solution into your existing processes? Do you have to redesign and redefine those processes? Can you train your staff to do this? And can you make it work for people, really? And final dimension, which is very important too, is ethics. So ethics is kind of about two main things in here. So first of all, can you explain the rationale that the AI has taken to provide a specific answer, provide a specific recommendation? How far can you justify this? And the other thing is, are you comfortable with the use case you're proposing? Are you comfortable that with the solutions that you're putting forward? Does it align with your organization's values? Does it align with your own personal values? And does it align with the values of the society you evolve in? So beyond these dimensions, what is AI good for, really? Well, it's very good at automating repetitive tasks. And this is also where you will more likely have people on board to actually use these solutions, because it will make their lives better, their lives easier. It's brilliant at finding patterns in large volumes of data. I mean, we know how data's proliferated. We know that it's grown massively big and complex. And as human beings, we just can't comprehend and can't apprehend all of it now anymore. So AI is far better than humans at dealing with very large, with complex patterns in large volumes of data. And finally, and this is where really, every use case should be about this. It should be about augmenting humans. So working in partnership between the human and the machine, and helping do the tasks that the humans isn't quite as good at, with the human supervising the human in driving seat at all times. When is AI less suitable then? Well, if there are no patterns to be found in the data, then AI can't help you. So you can ask GPT-4 to give you the results of the lottery. It might even give you an answer, but you're not going to be any more likely to win the lottery with it than if you'd selected random numbers. If there's an enhanced need for accountability, transparency, and explainability, AI might not be suitable. There are ways around it, but there are still certain use cases that as a society, we are not willing to accept. As organizations, you might not be willing to accept either. So we're seeing things like, I'm a big believer that self-driving cars should be the future. I think we'd all be safer. The world would be a better place if we were, if we let the machines drive the cars. But what would happen in that world is that every accident, and there would still be accidents, would be caused by an AI-powered car. We're not ready to take that risk. So it will save lives, but there will still be lives lost. And we need someone to blame. We can't, if the machine can't be 100%, and it can't be 100%, at least not today, then we're not quite willing to relinquish that level of control when lives are at stake. When data is heavily biased, it can be a problem to use AI as well. So we live in an imperfect world. Our data is only as good as our world is, and actually probably worse than it is. So our world's imperfections get translated and heightened in the data that we have, which again get heightened in the AI systems we build on top of this data. So again, there are ways to mitigate the bias in those data sets, but it's important to be aware of that when you select a use case. And finally, and I cannot stress this enough, don't use AI if you don't need AI. There are many use cases which can be solved with AI, but where there's a much simpler solution. Simple process change, a little bit of training, talking to someone, building an API, using traditional automation. There might be lots of ways out of a problem that don't actually require AI. And I understand that, with the VCs, the startups, the funding rounds, having AI as a flagship product makes a massive difference in terms of the money that you can get for funding. That doesn't mean it's the right thing to do from a solution perspective. So we've said that the tech is great. We've kind of know how to select the right use case now. So what else can possibly go wrong? Well, quite a few things, as you can see on this slide. So the first thing is governance gets in the way of being able to actually roll out your AI solutions and get them out in the real world. When I say governance, I talk about your data protection officer, your cybersecurity team, your HR teams. These stakeholders might not be interested in what you're trying to do, but they probably have the power to block it. So work with them from the very start, engage them when you're selecting the use case so that you can work with them on their concerns and you can start addressing them from the start. And you can already decide whether or not to go for a specific use case. We did a piece of work for NHS England recently. We didn't use any sensitive data. We still spent 6 months with the DPIA process. So we were using basic well, not even anonymized data that did not contain any sensitive information, was not clinical, did not contain any PII, we still spent months actually just getting through the governance. And then it took us 2 weeks to build a solution and roll it out. So have those conversations up front, because they will actually preempt a lot of the pain that you might have later on. The business case is a big blocker as well. So it's really easy to create a proof of concept. It takes very little time, very little money. Making it production ready is another matter. So, when you build your business case, you need to account for the cost of actually getting a production ready solution. That means dealing with security, dealing with anonymization, dealing with everything that gets in the way of something being green lighted for production release. Mentioned earlier, and I'm going to repeat it now, your solution is going to be useful only if people actually use it. So work on processes and integration. Try to integrate your solution as much as possible into the existing habits that people have. And if you're changing those habits, then use user testing sessions as a way of training, as a way of gathering feedback from the people that you work with, so that you can actually use that as a tool for change management. Bring those people with you on the journey. Every organization has a responsibility to train people today, as we're gonna see job displacement. Trust is also paramount. So again, by using these user testing sessions, people will start to trust these tools are actually helping them, making things better. But you also need to build in monitoring and observability to make sure that you can trust that the models continue to provide the right answers, the answers that you expect, or at least know when they don't, so you can take them offline and deal with the problem. And finally, scale is another challenge in a way. It's not as big a challenge because of all the hyperscaler solutions that we're seeing. So Google and AWS and Microsoft have very scalable solutions already, and the latency is going down. So it's getting a lot easier now to scale solutions. Sorry. But scale is also about cost. So that needs to feed into your business case. If you're dealing with hundreds of millions of requests, your solution is going to be a lot more costly than if you're dealing with a few thousand. As I said, adoption is really what matters here. If you want to be successful with an AI solution in the wild, you need people to actually use it. So making value really tangible. So by bringing people on the journey and showing to them what value it is, designing with these users, not to the users. Engaging with them early and regularly, so making them part of the design process in a way is really helpful. It's the most powerful change management tool you can find. Developing data and AI literacy is very important. You'll see a few organizations here are all about training. Our world is changing. Data has become a priority for most organizations. AI is next, if it's not first already. But we're not ready. We don't have enough people with the right talent today to do this. And we're not going to have to be able to wait for people coming out of university to get equipped with those skills. So we'll need to retrain the talent that we have within our organizations to make sure that they can start understanding data and AI and be literate enough to identify opportunities, or just at least to use the tools that are given to them. And then keep a human in the loop. As I mentioned earlier on, augmenting humans is the right way to use AI today. So make sure that you've got a human in the driving seat when you're rolling out your solutions. So we've explored advanced AI introduces many opportunities along the way, but there can be blockers along the way. So there are really several priorities that can guide the way. So we should direct innovation towards beneficial applications that really augment human capabilities, not replace, but enhance. The goal is that AI aids, it does not automate, or it aids humanity. Secondly, it's really important that flexibility is built in from the start. So as we see context evolve, AI systems must be able to adapt through continuous feedback loops and retraining, and there are no one-size-fits-all solutions that will work here. Third, ethics is really important. So our human values must be embedded into the AI design process from the very start of the process. So we'll have to work on impact assessments, diverse development teams, and community input to make sure that we build these systems responsibly and ethically. Regulation is also going to play a role, but ethical AI, responsible AI will not emerge from regulations, and we can't wait for these regulations to come out. So by trying to do the right thing, striving to do the right thing, you will most likely find yourselves on the right side of regulations when they come out. So we're seeing very different approaches in the three blocks, the US, Europe, and the UK, with the UK being very laissez-faire about all of it right now. There are some guidelines that have been issued, but they're just that, they're just guidelines. And whereas the EU is much more stringent today, and they've gone out quite a bit faster, and we've seen an executive order by Biden just about a year ago as well. So centering innovations on empowering people with equity and dignity will also be quite key here. So we know that there are risks and trade-offs, but I think these are already helping a little bit in addressing some of that. And as you can see, yes, this image was generated with Gen AI. You can see it still has a way to go. It's not great with text in general. We asked it for 5 things, it gave us 6. And then it really invented that adupability at the top. I don't know what he tried to say there, but we are, we're still safe for a while. There's rooms to grow. So we know that there's going to be impact on the job market, and one of the questions that most people ask themselves is, who does it benefit the most? Does it benefit people more senior in their careers, people more junior in their careers? And there's no real answer to that. We believe that it benefits seniors more today because we talk about augmenting AI, augmenting humans, and there has to be something to augment. So that knowledge of the organization, that experience can be augmented. But equally, we can see how juniors can now benefit from a personal coach, from additional training, better tools to actually get them equipped with the job faster. So it's a bit of a toss-in, really. But our bet right now is on the seniors, and that might change as we see AI evolve and the job market evolve as well. So finally, we see that AI can seem inexorable, inevitable, and we see, it might be tempting to just, throw the towel and give up and resign ourselves. But this is an unmovable train. We're not going to stop it in its track, but we're not helpless either. So we all have a responsibility to, guide and govern the developments of AI, especially people in the field. So let's work on voicing our ethical concerns when they arise. Electing wise leaders that can help guide this path as well, holding powerful institutions accountable for actually putting regulations in, building AI responsibly, so that we can influence AI one way or another. And there will be trade-offs, there will be disagreements. We're not always going to agree on everything, but having diversity of thought will really help, steer us in the right direction. When you have a room full of white males that makes decisions on designs for AI, that's when AI goes wrong. Actually, there's an image that I've taken out, but I think Apple created a credit card a few years ago, and what they did with that, they used AI to decide for the decision process on whether people should be approved or not for that credit card, and they really thought it through. They wanted to avoid biases, so they removed gender entirely from their data set. They would not take into account any data set, except that behaviors are very different between men and women. And therefore, they excluded women entirely from the approval process because they decided not to look at gender. So by trying to do good, they did the exact opposite. And again, so having this diversity of thought, having those tests, trying these things out early on helps mitigate those risks. And finally, bringing your people on the journey is really quite key. The people will need to be trained. They will need to adapt to new jobs. We're not at risk of AI taking over all of our jobs, but we're at risk of people that use AI really well taking over our jobs. So that's where we need to start looking into that and making sure that we're ready for that. And on that note, I'm ready for questions.
Thank you very much, Simon. Please join me in giving Simon a huge round of applause. We've got 10 minutes for questions, so please do shoot your hand up and let us know what you would like to ask Simon. We've got 2 wonderful ladies at the back there with microphones who can come and pass it to you so we can make sure you're all loud and clear. I've got a couple here in front of me, but does anyone else want to kick us off, or am I getting the honours? I think I'm going to get the honours. Cool. Thank you for that whistle stop tour. You covered quite a lot in that, Simon. So thank you for really giving us such a broad overview. I want to kind of build a little bit on where you finished, which was this point around not just ethics, but this idea of how we as people in business, citizens, researchers, writers, whatever, can influence the future. And I think sometimes there's this sense, you know, you showed the graph earlier, as much as it was a little out of date with the various different developments. I think we can kind of feel at a whim to the large players that are already defining and kind of making decisions about what Gen AI looks like in society right now. How do you see us actually being able to have any influence when in reality these are the people building these tools and these are the ones making the decisions, not us?
Yeah, it's quite hard, right? To we're seeing these organizations who have basically their revenue is basically bigger than the GDP of most countries, right? So they have enormous power on society as a whole. I think for me, the main disruption we've seen in society was before AI, with the rise of social media. That really, I mean, we've seen the social fabric and those movies. There was really severe disruption into how we operate as a society at that time, and that power was given to an organization called Meta today. So it's a good question. I don't know how we hold them to account. I think one of the things we can do is vote in general, make our voices heard, so that politicians can actually start taking these decisions. We're seeing these organizations saying, you need to regulate us. It's not our job to regulate ourselves, which is true. They might come to regret that. I hope they do come to regret it a bit. And then these organizations all have their own responsible AI codes. So I encourage you to go and read them, see, you know, whether those align to your values and to how you want to do AI. And you can compare them with the regulation, that like the guidelines that have been issued by the government just 3, 4, 5 months ago now. But yeah, I mean, we have power as consumers in general, but equally it's very hard not to use these organizations today if you want to function in society.
Yeah. Any other questions from? I've loads, so don't worry. But yes, gentlemen here, thank you.
Yeah, John McKenna here. Quick question on recent thing in the news with Microsoft and their recall functionality. I think with regard to ethics and governance that you mentioned, where did they go wrong?
Yeah, that's something that's actually been quite heavily discussed on our Slack channel within BJSS. Equally, the Slack policy of them listening to our messages is also something that we've discussed. Our views basically on that is that the recall function should not be activated by default. It should really be something that you go out of your way to activate yourself, because otherwise it's quite dangerous. You might not be aware of being recorded. I mean, I have an Alexa in my kitchen, so I'm fine with that. But you know, that's to each their own. Where you draw the lines and what you're comfortable with. So I think that's why, you know, being very transparent about what your data is being used for, and how it's being used to enhance your life, but giving you the power to stop it or empower it is important.
Thank you. Other questions? Yes, lady down in the front, please. Thank you.
Hi. You mentioned social media earlier, and I was just wondering, what is your opinion on, I guess, lessons learned from social media in terms of Gen AI and where that's going? I mean, do you think that government, companies, and people have kind of learned their lesson on just letting things go unchecked? Or do you think we're heading in that direction again, and it's just going to be kind of catching up?
So there is a chance that we go down that path again. But what I do think is that we as people have learned from it. So I think with Cambridge Analytica a few years back, we've learned where our data is going now. So I have changed my privacy, my consent settings. I now disable consent on everything in terms of cookies. I go out my way to do that. And I think a lot of people are doing the same. Not everyone. But we've grown a little bit as a society in terms of what data is and how it's being used. But there's still a lot to do, and that's why I talk about data and AI literacy. This is by educating people in that we will help prevent the next catastrophe. There was I think 2 years ago, the NHS changed their privacy policy, and they basically said they can start using your data but unless you opt out. I went and rushed to opt out, and I think there was a lot of noise that was made at the time as well, where other people started. I mean, NHS England in this case. I don't know whether it applies here. So I know that it's it's talked about a lot more than it used to be.
You want to build a little bit?
I was just wondering, with social media, I don't want to say it's easy, but it's like, I'm not really on anything anymore either, except for maybe LinkedIn. How do you feel about with AI? I mean, is that even really a possibility to like opt out and to, consumer wise, make your own decisions?
So depending on the tools that you use, your data might not be used back. So if you use ChatGPT Plus, for instance, you're not actually, you don't have your data is not going to be used. You can block your data being used for retraining. I think you can also block it on the free version, but then you don't get your history anymore, and it doesn't learn from you. So it's, again, there is control even for AI and Gen AI, but it's an evolving field, and it's not perfect yet.
Certainly an open question around the social pressure to use these tools. It's not so much about the technological ability to opt out. It's the fact
it's
that
financial as well. It's not just social and societal. It is quite important to start using these tools on a day-to-day basis, because the promise of being more efficient is really large. It's very hard to perform.
that's precisely what I mean. You almost can't. Gentleman over here in the corner, yes.
Hi, was this on?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you for your talk. You touched on this briefly, but I was wondering if I could get your opinion on who should be held responsible if something were to go wrong in an establishment. Should it be management or the developers, or is the user responsible for when they interact with an AI?
I think we're going to see a new class of insurances, to be honest. I think we're going to see new products where these organizations start to contract these insurances for social liability, social responsibility. But today, we're seeing social media companies specifically deciding to completely ignore their responsibilities in this space. And apart from GDPR being able to bite back a little bit, we're struggling to enforce any regulation on them. So it should be the developers, it should be the end users, it should be a bit of everyone. But again, you can only make people responsible when they understand what they're doing and how they're using it. So I think, again, it comes down to awareness and training, and then hopefully some regulation is going to help.
You only have to look, though, again, going back to this point. I mean, we've recently seen what was it called? The Copyright Shield that OpenAI have built into their developer platform, which essentially means that if anyone tries to sue a company that uses OpenAI's platform for copyright reasons, they've built into their entire developer agreement that they will help you defend against it. So you're not really, it's almost like pushing responsibility.
Well, it's untested in the legal system, right? So there's no precedence yet, really. Although we've seen, I think it's the New York Times that's been able to successfully sue OpenAI and actually get some compensation. I think they've signed a deal with Stack Overflow as well, where they're actually giving back some money to Stack Overflow for all the content they've pillaged over the years. But the main issue is that we don't know what they've used to train, actually, right? They're not being transparent about this. No organization is. And when OpenAI did the first time, they got sued. So they're not doing that anymore. And Google have learned and haven't done it at all either.
We have time for one final question if anyone wants to put in their, oh no, you're just passing the mic back. Cool. Well, with that then, I think we'll wrap up. If you can join me in giving Simon a huge round of applause to thank him for his thoughts today.
Thank you.